Okay, everyone, shall we make a start? Good afternoon. Boa tarde a todos. I'm Stephanie Dennison, and I'm a chair of Brazilian Studies here at the university, and it's my great pleasure to chair this final keynote of SLAS. And as we're drawing things to a close, I want first to take this opportunity to thank the SLAS organising team, of which I played an absolutely minuscule part. So I'm going to thank Thea, I'm going to thank Victoria, I'm going to thank our student helpers, and in particular Marcus Freundorfer and Anna Grimaldi. And I have to say that Anna has been absolutely tireless in bringing everything together, and we've had an excellent conference so far. I hope you agree. Should we have a round of applause for Anna? But we're not done yet. And I'm delighted that the Instituto Guimarães Rosa and the British Council are sponsoring our final keynote as part of the UK-Brazil Season of Culture. And the season runs until June this year, and it's organised as a partnership between the British Council and Guimarães Rosa Institute, which is Brazil's new cultural diplomacy initiative attached to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And this year-long cultural exchange between the two countries showcases the diverse and vibrant art sectors of both nations, and it marks 200 years of diplomatic relations and is designed to strengthen, it's like I'm reading this off the web, aren't I? It's designed to strengthen and build cultural connections between the UK and Brazil. But I'm particularly pleased to see that there's so many academic events that are being included in this season, which is actually quite unusual. And at Leeds, we've already organised a few. So we curated a Brazilian film retrospective as part of the Leeds International Film Festival. We received the acclaimed Afro-Brazilian writer Conceição Evaristo, and we will be holding a seminar discussion with Ambassador Nakata of the Guimarães Rosa Institute over the course of the next couple of months. And I'm very happy to welcome to Leeds Professor Guilherme Wisnik, to deliver this keynote. Professor Wisnik is a tenured professor and vice dean of the Faculty of Architecture and Urbanism at the University of São Paulo. And he is the curator of the Brazilian Museum of Sculpture and Ecology. He was the chief curator of the 10th São Paulo Architecture Biennial in 2013 and of the exhibition Infinite Span, 90 Years of Brazilian Architecture in a Casa de Arquitetura de Portugal in 2018, and of the Brazilian Pavilion at Expo 2020 in Dubai. And he's the author of a very important text on Lúcio Costa, who was one of the designers of the city of Brasilia, and Dentro do Nevoeiro, or Inside the Mist, Contemporary Art, Architecture and Technology, published in 2018 and based on your PhD thesis. And he received the Prominence 2018 award from the Brazilian Association of Art Critics. And more recently, in 2025-2026, he co-curated the critically acclaimed and absolutely wonderful Complexo Brasil exhibition at the Gulbenkian Foundation in Lisbon, in Portugal. And the title of Professor Wisnik's keynote is Public Space and the Dispute Over Memory in Brazil. Guilherme, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for your kind introduction, and thank you all for being here. It's an honor to me to be here in the seminar and closing the seminar in such an important position. So I have the opportunity to discuss with you in this moment some important, in my opinion, issues concerning the public space in Brazil and the activism and the public sphere in general. So I will be sitting down because I have a sheet of paper as my script. I will read some parts and I will add some comments as a way of improvising. So public space is commonly understood by architects as a place of peace, an idea that goes back to the bucolic and idealized vision we have of European parks. But the public attribute, on the contrary, refers to the conflictual dimension of our societies. This is an image of a very bucolic landscape design in English style in São Paulo, Parque Dom Pedro. Today is a kind of a miracle because it's not like that anymore. I have another photo of a contemporary scene of the same view. This is the situation, so you can see what happened to this park. But not only with this park, it's a kind of a metaphor of what happened to all the parks and all the public spaces in São Paulo, for example, destroyed by the rodoviarism. I don't know if you use this word. Huh? Highwayism. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so the transformation of the car into the citizen. That's the issue here, what happened to our cities in this sense. But at the same time, I don't want to idealize the former public space, like saying, oh, that old times was good and nowadays it's terrible. No, what I want to do is exactly go beyond the idealization and trying to understand better how is the real dynamic of our cities and its contradictions. So, for example, in this photo, you see an artwork of a project I curated, and this artwork was created by a Mexican-born artist, Hector Zamora, and it's called Errant. So it's a kind of a surrealistic floating garden over the Tamanduateí River, because this was Parque Dom Pedro one day. So this is a kind of a nightmare, right, or a dream, the return of what is underground, the layers of our history that one day can come back, but as a kind of nightmare. Going back to my script. So this conflict should not be ideologically erased. I was saying that for us architects, the public space in general is thought as a place of peace. This is the idea I want to criticize. So this conflict should not be ideologically erased by urbanism, but made explicit, enhanced. In this sense, I intend to show and discuss actions of political activism and urban art that reinforce the sense of public space as a place for mediating social differences. When I say us architects, I'm doing a critique to the profession of being architects, and even to the university when we teach urbanism, because I see many times the students drawing a square or a park, thinking about it creates for a kind of miracle the public space, but it's not the case. And more important, we don't want to bring this idea of peace to public space. Pay attention. The right wing of politics, the Bolsonaristas, are using every time the word pacification. So what means pacification or peace in this sense? Public space in the third world or in the global south is a place of contradictions. And what we have to do is to deal with the contradictions, not to erase it with urbanism. So that's my point. In this photo, this artwork in the 70s, is a clandestine action carried out by a collective of artists called Três Nós Três during Brazil's military dictatorship, in which they covered the heads of historical statues in the city center of São Paulo with plastic bags. The gesture alluded to the torture practices inflicted on political prisoners at the time. So one day, people wake up in São Paulo and the monuments were like that. So, of course, the police came to to erase it, but it was done. I believe that in Brazil we have a different understanding of what public space is when compared to European countries or the so-called West. For us, the political paradigm of public space, historically linked to the Greek agora, has never been a concrete reality. On the contrary, our squares and parks are often fenced and privatized, like this. This is Largo da Batata in São Paulo, a kind of tragedy. After 10 years of working on the municipality for creating a new public space, they offered that for the city. Yet, the dimension of collective and non-hierarchical experience in public space takes place largely on urban beaches associated with a more playful, leisure-oriented sphere. So, is impressive, this photo, right? I know. What I want to say in this moment of my speech is maybe in these super conflict spaces of our cities in Brazil, the formality of a square or of a park is not working like being a translation of Greek agora. No? So the politics is not in the center of our sense of being public, but in leisure situations, in urban beaches like in Rio or in Salvador or in Recife, we see this dimension of mixture of many differences in our society being successful in the sense. Of course, there are many attempts to erase it. So municipality in Rio many times canceled lines of buses bringing people from north suburbs to the south. But they don't succeed. So many times it doesn't happen in Rio. So the beach continued to be a real public space in the sense of receiving this mixture of people, mainly in the weekends, in the summer. So I was talking about leisure, and yet the dimension in beach associated playful leisure-oriented sphere. It also emerges in street carnival processions, where the collective dimension of festivity is often intertwined with identity-based and racialized agendas. This is a famous photo by Carlos Vergara of Cacique de Ramos street block carnival in Rio in the 70s. Cacique de Ramos. Cacique is a word for a leader of an indigenous group, and Ramos is a neighborhood in the north part of Rio. And this street block carnival, very famous in Rio, is a mixture of indigenous people and black people in Rio with affirmation of their identity and the power of the body in the space of the city is what we see in this photo. And the word written in the body is power. So poder is power. So this is a super strong affirmation of not only resistance, but more than this, the presence as power. And it is connected to this idea of the street carnival being something important in terms of public space. That's my point. Again, so you see the beaches and the carnival. So not exactly the public as formal instance, but the informality. It's more the occupation in the informality side of the urban life. Very nice as well. Is another street block carnival occupying the pilates of the modern monument in Rio, the Ministry of Education building. Here we see the Pilates Plaza of the modernist Ministry of Education building in Rio, transformed into a space of celebration. I'm not sure if I have time to do it, but I would like to open a door to talk about this. I curated, as Stephanie was saying in my introduction, I curated an exhibition in Portugal about Brazilian architecture called Infinite Span. Infinite Span is an attempt to translate to English what is impossible to translate. And Katusha's presentation before me was doing the same, doing good translations in this way, because span is a poor translation of vão. Vão in Portuguese is much more than span, because vão is at the same time a word for a large space between columns. So in terms of structure in architecture is a vão. But vão, at the same time, is something that you do, and it's a failure. You do in vão. No? So aquilo foi em vão. It's not a success. It was a failure. And Gilberto Gil has a very beautiful song called Drão. Drão is the name of his wife, not anymore, Sandra, Sandrão, Drão. And when they got separated after many years with children, all of this, a long history, he composed this song called Drão, where he says, I will try to sing. Drão, não pense na separação, não despedace o coração, o verdadeiro amor é vão. Estende-se infinito, imenso monolito, nossa arquitetura. So it's in Portuguese, but architecture in the song is connected to the vão, which is a span, but it's the same time something that failed, the relationship between two persons. But the construction that results of this failure is our architecture in the song. So the idea of this architecture is to building up, to conquer the vão as a challenge. That's why we decided to call the exhibition Infinite Span. So this is the first, so this Pilates Plaza is the first attempt in our architecture to create public space doing big spans that goes beyond in MASP, and this is the supreme realization of that idea. This is the infinite span, and this is the most successful public space in São Paulo. So what happened in this sense? Why did I go back to this idea of infinite span and the exhibition? Because many times we think about the poetics of Brazilian architecture in terms of techniques, creating big spans to turn the buildings lighter and floating. Okay, it's a way of thinking about. But the other way is our architecture realizing that in our cities we don't have public spaces, so they decided to put it in the sky, the building, to open the space in the ground floor to public spaces. So it's a vision of generosity in terms of urbanism, right? And that's the point. So we have not exactly formal public spaces like squares and plazas, but spaces that are born by other ways, being informal or being in private lands like this, and that's it. The Virada Cultural is an annual event that takes place in São Paulo, featuring artistic activities in the city center over the course of an entire weekend. In 2013, throughout the night, a group illuminated the facades of empty buildings in the region. The projected icon is a mathematical concept, meaning empty set, conjunto vazio. São Paulo has more than 1,300 closed buildings with no residents in the city center. And if they were to be effectively occupied, almost the entire homeless population of the city would be sheltered. Through simple technological resources, the artistic action brings to light the immense social injustice in the segregated space of the city. In the last decade, Brazilian cities have been experiencing a great effervescence. Since the June 2013 riots, Brazil's urban population seems to have woken up of the idea of citizenship, creating movements that face real estate speculation and fight for the right to the public spaces and quality transport. The city is ours, occupy it, says the motto of the movement Occupy Estelita in Recife, in the northeast part of the country. Movements that has managed for years to prevent the construction of luxury towers in the city's harbor area in total disregard of its urban legislation. This is a satirical campaign that the movement created with a famous song there, very nice. I recommend you to search for it, because there are many strategies of bringing up notices and this idea, because it was a huge occupation. David Harvey was there with the people. So for years, it's really an important movement that could change a lot our comprehension of facing real estate speculation. This great satisfaction that took the streets in 2013 responds to the great precariousness of public spaces in Brazilian cities. In the superdensity of favelas, for example, the only public spaces that exist are always football fields, which are also used for parties and collective meetings. What I want to say again is in a super dense area like communities and favelas, of course, we don't see squares because the municipality is not there creating public space, but the population creates these soccer fields, football fields, because this is the space recognized by everybody as important in the sense of creating a sense of community. So meetings, all the parties happens in this space. Again, the paradigm of informality, working. Since the 1950s, the rapid growth of the car fleet in São Paulo has caused the destruction of a large part of its public spaces. This is the construction of, we call, an elevated highway of 6 kilometers in São Paulo called Minhocão. That could be big worm, right? In these photos, we see the tragedy of what is it. And this is the photo of the first day. So this is the inauguration. It was not a success, right? So since the first day, so it was like that. And the São Paulo first garage building in the 50s. With more than 60 garage buildings in the center, São Paulo is the city with the largest number of buildings with this program in the world. So many cars, what to do with this? So buildings for the cars. Here we see a large condominium with residential and office towers and a shopping mall. Enclosed by walls, the complex is not accessible for pedestrians, but only for cars. We can also see here in the other photo how the excess of garage buildings causes a desertification of the city sidewalks, impoverishing urban life. In the Atlas of São Paulo, made by photographer Tuca Vieira, this scene is repeated countless times, constituting a kind of urban identity in São Paulo, unfortunately. This photo was published in a commemorative magazine of the anniversary of São Paulo in 1971. It shows the same elevated expressway, Minhocão, that I presented before, crowned by a reinforced concrete square, empty for sure, which we also see in this photo. The complex is extremely arid and has driven people out of that area of the city, which remained empty, so they built a square for people, but people didn't want to go to the square, so it was a desert. And going back to this photo, ironically, the text over the photo says a more human city. It was during the dictatorship period. It was a propaganda of the urbanism that time. If we go back in time, we realize that the precariousness of public space dates back to colonial times. Many of the squares built by the Portuguese in Brazil are called largos. Largo means widening, which usually refers to an intersection of triangular-shaped streets. The space that is formed, there is a largo, like this in São Paulo, which means that public space in Brazil born more as a leftover than as a principle of organizing cities. I'm comparing Portuguese cities to Spanish cities in America, for example, because the Spanish, they every time built cities in a grid. So starting from the square, the Plaza Mayor. So the public space is the beginning, is the origin, is the heart, the core. And in the Portuguese case is the opposite. I'm not saying I prefer the Spanish. I'm saying it's different. But the result is that for us the public space is not is a result sometimes, but it's not in the genetics of the city. In spontaneous Portuguese urbanism, private spaces are more important than public ones. That's for sure. I will jump it because I don't have time. In June 2013, the streets of Brazilian cities were aflame with demonstrations in favor of better public transport and against corruption. In line with the international movements of Springs and Occupies, part of the Brazilian population started to demand better public spaces. For middle classes and rich ones, they were no longer satisfied with living in gated housing communities, driving around the city in private cars, and having their sociability inside shopping malls. It was the birth of a new desire for citizenship. In Rio, the result of this new desire for citizenship is, for example, Parque Augusta in São Paulo, the struggle for Parque Minhocão or for Parque do Rio Bixiga, now beside of Teatro Oficina. Many examples like this. In Rio de Janeiro, a city divided by social violence and drug traffickers' control of favelas, artist Ronald Duarte set train tracks on fire in an artwork called Crossfire, which replicates violence as an impactful urban experience. The museum is the world, said the artist Hélio Oiticica back in the 60s. In the streets outside museums and art galleries, the work of art blends into urban warfare, trying to wake up people from the anesthesia of everyday life. In São Paulo, in a tunnel with walls very dirty from the pollution caused by cars, artist Alexandre Orion makes a negative graffiti, cleaning the suit in the form of bones and skeletons with alcohol. Threatened with arrest by the police, he argued that he had not done anything prohibited, as he was just cleaning up the city. Ironically, by low-tech means, he denounces the abandon of the city by the public authorities. But the exposure of social and urban conflict doesn't exclude playful experiences. Here, in the heavy concrete structures of the same viaduct that I showed in previous image, the Minhocão, the Basurama collective group hangs swings made from tires in an allusion to the cars that circulate above. The car's residue is transformed into a pedestrian game or a kid's game, giving new meaning to the place. The theme here is the sacrifice, I think, because when the elevated expressway was built, it sacrificed public spaces. Now, the artwork is going there to sacrifice the cars again. So it's symbolic at the same time. That's why we need ludic practices, but some violence at the same time. Here, I'm finishing. Here I show you images of Praia da Estação movement, Beach of Station movement. In 2010, the mayor of Belo Horizonte prohibited agglomerations in this square in the central area of the city. In reaction to this, the population began to occupy it every Saturday, wearing bathing suits in a weekly carnival. Belo Horizonte is the capital of Minas Gerais. They have there in Minas a kind of trauma of not having beach. That's why they decided to do a beach in the square every Saturday, and they're still doing. It's an amazing photo, right? It's a kind of big parangolé by Eliticica collective. Until today, or rather until the beginning of the pandemic times, this new urban ritual has been maintained both on sunny or rainy days. Criticism of the control of urban spaces is also made through the party. To conclude, I would like to briefly address actions and movements that critically engage with racism and colonial memory. The Frente 3 de Fevereiro is an artists group that has denounced the disappearance of black people in Brazilian society. One of their actions consists of a large banner unfurled, difficult to say it, during a football match, parasitically using the television broadcast as means of dissemination political messages. It's a kind of parasite in this sense, because it was year 2005, so not social media so strong that time. So it was television. And during broadcast television of a match, Corinthians match for sure, they opened this large banner with the phrase, "Where are the black people?" So it's a simple one, but so they could use the television transmission to political messages. Another action involves a similarly large banner stretched across the facade of a building occupied by homeless people bearing the message, "We are Zumbi," in Ocupação Prestes Maia in the city center of São Paulo. So recalling that Zumbi was a great Quilombola leader who fought against enslavement of black people in the 17th century. For a more comprehensive and interesting definition of Quilombo, I refer to the speech of Katusha before me. Very important, because Quilombo was not only a definition of a resistance in the past, but an ongoing practice in the Brazilian present. That's why this artwork says, "We are Zumbi." So we are still Zumbi, we are still Quilombola in the city center. fighting for being here. So these were graffiti actions carried out as a form of protest against a monument that celebrates the bandeirantes as national heroes. Responsible for the expansion of Brazil's territorial frontiers, the bandeirantes were men who, during the colonial period, explored new territories in search of gold and captured indigenous people for enslavement. So, of course, this is a super important thing nowadays. Why do we have these heroes in the cities? So, do we want to still have it in our cities or not? Of course, it's a huge debate, discussions. People from the heritage patrimony says that it's history. It's true, the history cannot be erased, but the history is in dispute. So we cannot be so polite with such monuments, right? That's my opinion. The other one is Borba Gato. Borba Gato, the figure depicted here holding a weapon, was also a bandeirante. More violent, the act of setting the statue on fire, undertaken with an explicitly counter-artistic stance, is highly symptomatic of the ongoing dispute over the notion of memory in contemporary Brazil. After all, as we know, the construction of the future is always a struggle, and the dispute over the past is an essential part of that struggle. It would be the end, but I have another one to close it. I cannot resist. This is an act of involuntary urban activism, because it was the heavy winds that destroyed the Statue of Liberty of Avan store. But the owner of Avan store is a well-known Bolsonarista in Brazil. And this is the symbol of our new colonial thought, because as you see, he copies the symbols from the United States, the White House and the Statue of Liberty. So this is the wind creating urban art. Thank you.